Hello, all. I'm sure you can all hear me. This is going very smoothly from a technical standpoint. So welcome. So I'd like to start with the women in tech on the call, and let's start with asking Nicole the first question. So first of all, Ultranauts, 75% of the Ultranaut staff is on the autism spectrum, and they have an NPS score of 100%. Not many companies can claim that, right? This is clearly a strategy that has benefited from a diversity standpoint, but I'm sure it's not diversity alone. Nicole, let's start by asking you, what has changed since the crisis, and how is your customer base responding, and how are you responding to them in this environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ultranauts is a professional services firm. We do software quality assurance, test automation, and data quality engineering. And like you mentioned, the majority of our workforce is either autistic or neurodivergent. So we're pioneering new ways to work together inclusively. Excuse me, can you hear me? I'm getting a lot of crosstalk.
We can hear you.
Okay. So I'm hearing other voices in the background, so it's difficult for me to keep my brain straight. Anyway, the question was, what are you noticing that's different? And I would say that there's one thing that stands out to me, and that is that since the majority of the workforce has transitioned to remote work, I've been working remotely pretty much the whole time since 2009, and then I also did a little stint of remote work back in 95 and 96. But now everybody is remote. And so one of the really interesting things that's happening is that any sort of issues or discrepancies or disconnects that you have, particularly in your data management and your process management, things that ordinarily could be glossed over by just walking across the room and talking to somebody. It's not as easy to do now, even though we have all the digital tools in place to communicate. The entire way that we interact with each other has changed. So it's the whole shift is highlighting, it's shining the spotlight on these data and process issues that have been around before, but that we could just cover over by talking to each other, checking in with each other frequently during the day. So for us at Ultranauts, it's kind of an interesting case because the company's been around for 7 years, and it started out as an all remote, all the time organization. So we're really well versed in this remote work, and we're starting to, we've known that you need to deal with the data management, the process management issues, and we've developed some really interesting ways to communicate that I can talk about a little bit later. But I think that's the big issue there. Things that were pain points before are now broadly more painful.
How are your customers responding to this? Are you seeing a big difference in the way they're working with you, given the changes that they may not have been prepared for?
So yeah, we have a couple of clients that we work with, and the shift was particularly transformative for them. Particularly organizations that have high security requirements, where they're used to everyone being physically co-located in order to protect their data and their IP. And so, there've been some bumps in working with them, but the nice thing is that we've been able to set a standard. We've been doing this for a while. We know the ins and outs of it. We know the pitfalls and the ways that you can communicate better. And so we've really been able to help a lot of our clients with their transition just by taking the lead.
So your learning from your evolution is helping other clients during their revolution. That's a nice connection back to the title of this event. Thank you, Nicole. Let's ask Steve this. So Steve is from iHeartMedia. Steve, I was most impressed with the quality of your virtual delivery of the Rise Up concert in partnership with Robinhood. It was really impressive, the number of performers, the seamless transition from one performer to the next. But you are in a unique industry with over 850 radio stations across the country, which means maintaining ad inventory across them all. So how has iHeartMedia had to respond to product innovation, or have you had to use data in targeting different demographics because everyone's listening differently today and everyone's online?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, radio's been around a while. We've got a station, WOAI in San Antonio, that's celebrating its 100th birthday in 2022. So pretty old industry, a lot of muscle memory. Things have been done the same way for a long time. And one of the problems with broadcast from an advertiser perspective is you don't really know who hears the signal. It goes out over the airwaves, and there's no way other than Nielsen, which looks increasingly long in the tooth, with their small panels and their infrequent data updates. There's really no way to know what's going on. And what's been revolutionary for us is iHeartRadio as a medium. And the idea that digital listeners, which is a one-to-one relationship with us, those are subscribers that we know a lot about. That's now become more than 10% of our listening volume. So you're talking about tens of millions of regular listeners, and that's material. When we go to think about who those people are and what they do and how we can present back to advertisers the real-time gratification that they've been taught to expect by the digital advertisers and digital media, we're in a position to do that and to make pretty strong statistical statements about who's out there and what they heard. So that's sort of at the core of the transformation from an advertiser perspective. I would say also the way that we think about ourselves has changed, because I think if you had come to iHeart 10 years ago, Clear Channel at the time, you would have found a company that really thought of itself as 158 different small radio companies really combined into a large corporation. Now we've kind of flipped that around, and we definitely think of ourselves as an audio company, not a broadcast radio company, that's differentiated by three things. One is the iHeart brand. It's the first company I've worked for where all my kids want our T-shirt, and I don't know that that's true of the other broadcast companies. But we have a really strong brand with consumers. The second thing is we're truly local. We're in 158 cities. We know how to pronounce the local streets. We know what's going on. If there's a new litter of goats born, we know that better than anybody, and we're really plugged in at that level. And then the third thing is what my boss would describe as companionship, which is the talent that works for iHeartMedia. Big Boy in LA, Charlemagne the God in the Breakfast Club, Elvis Duran, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, all these folks work for iHeart, and they're part of our service offering. And among those three things, you'll notice I didn't mention AM and FM, which I think as time passes, become more and more incidental to the process. And in the end, I think our product, the way that we think of it now, is really a mashup of songs and ads and things that people say that's really delivered on the listener's terms, which I think is the future. We're headed down the path where people expect to consume things on their terms. And my job as the technology guy is to provide a back end that's sort of agnostic to whether we're producing something that we want to label as broadcast or something we want to label as a stream or something we want to label as a podcast. In the end, those are all ideally just marketing terms that refer to a product that comes from a common back end.
So one thing you said, Steve, was about your demographic listening preferences and so on, that you've got a lot of access to that because they're online. They've created a little bit of a relationship with you. Clearly, there are excellent technologies today, and I've heard from many companies on triangulating. You even know where people are in relative to brands or shops or malls, if malls come back the way we want them to. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit on using these kind of modern location-based technologies as well?
Yeah, it's a real breakthrough for us that the endpoint now, which is increasingly mobile, is also smarter and smarter. And if you look at what's happening in the automobile, it's not going to be long before entertainment in the automobile is really a digital experience. And even if radio signals continue to come in the form of AM and FM, I think the presentation to the listener in the vehicle or in their home for that matter is going to be a lot different from a traditional dial with numbers and knobs, right? And so that's an opportunity for us, and that is a one-to-one thing. We get information back from the endpoint that tells us a bit about location. We even collect things like volume up, volume down, and station switching, which are all indicators of what people like and what they're doing and how they're reacting to what we present them with. And I think advertising sometimes has a sort of a bad rap, and rightly so, because in the broadcast world, It's sort of a shotgun and not a sniper rifle. It's content delivered for the masses. But in a world where we can target and we can individualize, I think advertising can have a lot of value. And the more we can learn about who's at the other end and what they like and what they're doing. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm increasingly impressed with Amazon and Google's ability to figure out what I'm interested in and present it to me in a way that triggers me to click and buy, which I do a ton of. It's embarrassing how much time the Amazon delivery truck spends in my driveway these days. But you know, it's a big opportunity to really add value and not be a nuisance as an advertising service provider.
That's great. You have a similar business model to a company called TV Squared, where they're doing some breakthrough stuff with broadcast television as well. But who would have thought you would have evolutionized from, if that's a word even, from AM, FM to GPS positioning? I mean, as a radio, as a company that does radio for a living. Excellent. That's very eye-opening, Steve. Thank you. Ravi, let's move on to you. You're from I call it a health and wellness company. And you have shoes, New Balance, and so you've got a lot of retail impact. And something I read recently from an article put together by Julie Sweet, the CEO of Accenture. She cites the 5 rules of digital transformation during a crisis, and one of them resonated. It says move at lean speed, right? That means many things to many people. Sometimes these words are misconstrued and used in the wrong context. But she's asked primarily for companies to identify what barriers have been removed by working remotely, and how do they manage the decision-making governance. And I know Nicole touched upon that a little bit, and we'll come back to that. But how is that playing out in the health and wellness business? What are you seeing differently? So you're on mute, Ravi.
No. Yes, can you hear me? My apologies. Yeah. Thank you, Yuri. So New Balance is well known for footwear, but we are also into apparel, wonderful apparel. And talk about revolution. There is a revolution happening in the health and wellness area. As people are cooped up in homes and in certain locations, there is a growing need for people to go outside, whether it is running, brisk walking, or just walking. And so we are seeing a tremendous increase in not just us, but in this category where folks want to get out. And so to your point about the lean speed, one of the biggest things that has happened in this post-pandemic world is organizations have figured out that they have to survive and they have to sustain. And my message to more the folks from the line of business is, I think you touched on it. Break down the problem into smaller chunk, the componentization of software, but you also need to componentize your business process models so that you can start addressing some of these things, and you don't have to overthink a problem or a solution. That's my message. And it seems to be resonating very well. And so in our case, there are multiple areas. We are also a manufacturing organization, one of the very few athletic companies that still does manufacturing in the US. So we have 5 plants in the US, 1 in UK. So we are made in USA and made in UK product is flying off the shelf, not just here, but even overseas. So we are doing that quick to market there, as well as on the retail front. How do we enable a better shopping experience in terms of product availability? Very simple. So if I look up a particular store or our franchise stores, do I have the product? And if I were to go there, can I go and pick it up? So those are the prescriptive steps. But After this, I break this whole thing into 3 phases. One is the reactionary phase, which we were all put into. The phase we are in right now is the adapting phase, and each one is trying to adapt and figure out, and that's where your revolution/evolution is happening. And the next phase is really the evolution, which is new normal or new ways of doing things, right? Everybody's talking about it, but each one will have to come up with a mousetrap. And I say that we are in the golden age of IT and digital evolution in that case. So we are doing the same thing. We have also experimented with RPA. You had touched on innovation and experimentation. So we did that a while ago, and we're reaping big benefits from use cases that we never expected. We were very focused in North America, and we found that the adoption in Australia was amazing. And so they're becoming the example for the rest of the world.
That's a very good response, Ravi. The one thing I read about with your company was you also had, a great partnership with the Western, called the Western Workout, where you delivered shoes to people in hotels. And I thought, not all transformation has to be digital. It can be, relationship based, and you build a customer base. Indirectly, it's a customer experience without a UX, right? You got to face to the UX is the person delivering for you.
Collecting that data and then anonymizing and understanding feedback into the product will be very critical. And so those kinds of sort of smaller experiments will really go back to the product dimension or the customer or the consumer dimension.
Thank you for that. Ken, last but not the least, Omnicom Media, which is a behemoth in its own right. As expected, many of your clients are probably, especially in the hospitality business, have reduced spending. So you've had, just based on what Ravi just said, initially it's a reactionary phase, then you get to that evolutionary state or revolutionary state. How are you folks responding in the shift? Maybe using data or new product creation? Is content playing a role in that conversation, being in media from an advertising perspective?
Yeah, thank you. I think when we look at us as a Omnicom Media Group, as a media organization, our evolution has been from just a buying and a planning and buying company to really one that I look now and, we look at where, we're about data, we're about research, we're about strategy, and we're also about the execution side of things. And I think when we look over what's happened and the reaction in the beginning, especially from our client base, and what they were turning to us for, guidance and advice, and sky's falling, and so you're reacting to where we took a step back and said, okay, well, what is going to help in this phase? And so you kind of talked about this earlier in this dark data, right? And we had data in a variety of silos. So we started really very rapidly putting these different data points together into something we call a fast start dashboard. And that started putting different viewpoints and different lenses from a market to industries on a global basis. That was something that we could then sit down with our clients and really start to have these conversations about, the trends that we're seeing, but trends from a global perspective. So maybe we'd see an earlier trend in Asia Pac that then you may start to see in Europe, and then we can incorporate into, a US or North America plan strategy. So, we went from that reactive phase to this proactive phase of bringing the data together, reaching out and having the conversations with our clients in a way that we haven't had before, right? And then, we had this whole, the racial situation that's been going on that adds this other layer to this data set. To sit and talk with our clients about that and look at, their brands and what does that mean? And what are we shifting from our advertising dollars, right? Steve talked about, advertising and, it becoming more targeted. And I think that's a great thing. I don't need to see pamper commercials today because Fortunately, my kids are way out of Pampers. But, you know, I want to see that next truck or the next car because I'm in my midlife crisis, right? So, you know, whatever is more appropriate to me that helped me, you know, make that decision, and it's a messaging around. So we're able to look at attitudinal behavior, you know, trends, you know, and different data points now so that we can then leverage this better with our clients. And then to your last comment, you know, this content, you know, you can see that explosion of content that's happened on, you know, whether it's, you know, Disney Plus, Apple TV, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, right? You know, it is content. Content is king right now. And so that's how we're focusing our conversations around, you know, where is that content? And it's being delivered in such a variety of ways, but so individualistic. And I think that's the big thing that we're seeing as we're moving. So how do we help that revolution and that change that is going on in our organization? It just comes back to, you know, this data for us and trying to put it together in ways that we hadn't before.
Well, thanks, Ken. I have many more questions. I'm sure we'll carry on this conversation offline and find a way to serve this up to the community that's listening in. Especially, I wanted to ask Nicole about remote working and how they handled it and so on, but we're out of time. So I'll leave the audience with one thought, right? I read a great quote recently by Angela Duckworth that said, you know, enthusiasm is common, but endurance is rare. And in the world we live in, it's about endurance, especially in the digital transformation world. And we end on that note. Thank you to all the panelists and to Landmark for hosting us. And Anthony, over to you.